Welcome to a new Backstage Community Session. Hi, my name is Vincenzo. I'm a software engineer. I work at Spotify, and I'm part of the Backstage community. And if this is the first time you're attending this session, this is the place where adopters, contributors, and maintainers get together to talk about Backstage, things about Backstage. And if you have things you want to discuss in the future, we have an issue open on a repository called Backstage/community on GitHub. So there you'll find the agenda for the next community session. Feel free to drop a message there, describe what you want to discuss, or if there is any topic you would like to go into the details. And then next time we will make sure to reserve some time and go and talk about it. Cool. Agenda for today. As usual, we had a release yesterday, so we will have some release highlight that Patrick will dive into it. Then we will have Scott from ASOS sharing with us more about their Backstage journey. And then at the end, we will reserve some time for some Q&A. Cool. Let's then dive into yesterday's release, version 1.31. I see some good stuff there, Backend System 1.0, some security fixes, but I will let Patrick dive into the details about it. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat, and then at the end, we will make sure to cover those questions. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, we have some good stuff here. But my name is Patrick. I go by Ragvip on GitHub, one of the core maintainers of Backstage. So yeah, September release 131. As Vincenzo mentioned, Backend System 1.0. We're very glad to have this out in the release at this point. So this kind of solidifies the APIs of the new backend system, promising stable APIs of whatever are in both the different packages that make up the backend system, guaranteeing that they will be stable for the foreseeable future, let's say, a long while. There's plenty more information about this if you go dig into the release notes about exactly what it means, which packages are stable, and so on. A lot of details there. Right, then we have new Frontend System updates as well. So we're working on the new Frontend System 2. It's in a much earlier phase than the backend system. We had made we keep iterating on it every release now, essentially, and there's a bunch of new updates in this release as well. Really nice ergonomic changes for, like, in particular, overriding extensions and how some of those pieces work. Right, we introduce a new app plugin. It's a weird one, but we think it works very nicely for like overriding the kind of base app in a front-end instance. So yeah, go check that out if you're interested in new front-end system. Then some things that apply more broadly as well. Yarn v4 by default. If you create a new Backstage project now with create app, then we now ship Yarn v4 by default. Yarn Classic, just we're running into increasing issues with Yarn install, the dependency addition process there, the Yarn add process, just not working as expected, and Yarn 4 seems a lot more stable, and is of course getting patch releases and so on now. Right, then one more thing to highlight just as a feature of the release, we now have app templating of the app. What is that? So up until now, when you've built a front-end app with Backstage, there's a configuration that's present when you're building it using the CLI, and parts of that configuration kind of get hard-coded into your build output. But it's not necessarily obvious to know which parts of it. So it's in particular the templating of the index.html page, but also the public path in general. So if you were hosting Backstage at the path, you need to host it on the same path as the configuration you had when you built the project. It's all quite confusing. Now, a lot of that has moved to runtime instead. So there's no longer this snapshot that happens when you build a project. You can keep changing these these configuration values at runtime as long as you're using the app backend. So should encounter fewer just general issues with hosting the app after this change. And then lastly, security fixes. We have not yet fully wrapped up the audit from the CNCF, the security audit from CNCF. That's been ongoing for the last little bit. But we do have their findings. So we have been able to ship a couple of security patches for the Catalog and TechDocs backend specifically. So make sure you're on the latest version of those. And then there will be more information as we wrap up the security audit fully. We'll have a blog post out about that in the future. Right, that's it for 1.31.
Good stuff. Nice. I see a question in the chat from Alex. Yarn v4 is using the immutable lock file feature possible now? Had issues upgrading to Yarn v4 because that feature wasn't working correctly?
I'm not sure about the build always resulting in a lock file change in Docker, unless there actually are lock file changes. But if you do want to allow lock file changes in CI, which now is recommended to only allow in certain scenarios, there's a specific flag that you would need to set. I think Vincenzo, maybe you have that flag.
This is something we discovered yesterday. Apparently, like this Yarn kind of like automatically enable the immutable flag under CI, and this is something I didn't know.
But it is only a flag that you would need if you actually want to mutate the yarn lock in CI, which would generally be unexpected unless you're, for example, templating a new app in CI or something like that. But yeah, that's the flag to use if you want to allow it in CI, the one Freben linked.
Yeah, feel free to post any other questions, then we will make sure to cover them in the Q&A section. My issue is that I don't want to allow mutations. Yeah, it's the opposite. Yeah, this is strange.
If you're talking about the production build focus, where you use workspace focus to install production dependencies only, I don't believe that's fixed in Yarn yet. I haven't seen a fix for that. It's a thing to report to the Yarn project, I think. I think it's a gap, so the more voices there, the better, I would say.
Nice. Report upstream. Cool. As I said, feel free to post any question, then we will cover them later. Cool. Let's move to the next item into the agenda. Scott from ASOS, Backstage Journey. Are you here, Scott?
I am here. Hi.
Amazing. Over to you.
Is that all right?
Let me give some power then. Can you share now?
Have a look. Someone else is sharing. You can.
Okay, let me stop. Yes. Nice. Try now.
Share. You see that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Let me just start this. You'll be pleased to know this isn't a very long deck. I'm not a very long PowerPoint deck type of person, so don't worry too much. I'll just get this started. Can you see that again? You might hear that a lot over the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. Good. Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Scott Frampton. I'm one of the principal software engineers at ASOS. I've been there around 10 years, a short gap in between, and I work in the reliability engineering area, and have done for a couple of years. If you're unaware of who ASOS are, we're one of the largest online fashion retailers for 20-somethings in the world. So we have millions of customers distributed across the world, a very large Azure-based technology stack, thousands of services, huge complexity, and from an organizational organizational and a technological perspective, we've kind of emulated the Spotify journey. We've discovered the same challenges along the way, and that's ultimately what led us to Backstage. So I'm going to try and take you through that 2-year journey, specifically around Backstage, in about 10, 15, 20 minutes with a little bit of slide work at the beginning, to try and distill it down, because I could talk about this for hours and hours, but I don't think any of you want that. Ultimately, breaking it down to, I guess, the 4 phases of the journey. Essentially, what we realized a couple of years ago is, as an organization with, at the time, around probably 60 platforms, 108, 60 teams, you know, hundreds of services, hundreds of components, hundreds of APIs, we were quickly realizing that we couldn't easily manage that estate. We couldn't understand exactly what was deployed into production at any one time. We couldn't easily understand which teams were owners of which services. We couldn't understand, or we couldn't thread data from various different systems together, because they all had their own kind of identifier for the services and components out in the estate. And that was starting to cause us real problems, because, you know, as your engineering team grows, you want to make sure that you're trying to eradicate as much toil as possible. And if engineers are having to waste time finding out who owns certain services, that's a, you know, that's it's an interruption, it's toilsome, it's tiring. So we kind of embarked initially from an operational perspective with Backstage to firstly establish our software catalog, and that is to get an idea as to what was out in our estate. And so we looked at the various options available, and Backstage immediately stood out. We did look at a couple of the hosting options, the hosted options, but because we have a lot of expertise in building and deploying software, we're actually running in-house. So I did have to smile at myself earlier when Patrick mentioned the yarn challenges, because that has been something that we've encountered, and I've heard many an interesting word from some of the engineers around yarn in particular, less Backstage, more yarn. So interested in the version 4 updates on that. So essentially, yeah, we started with the software catalog. And the reason for that is because ultimately it's that data that we wanted to build other experiences around. So if we start with the software catalog and get teams and platforms modeling our estate, we'd be able to then, with that data, start build out experiences that kind of touch our other services, like you know, our incident management services, our various other build and automation services, our dashboarding services, and that sort of thing. So we could really sort of stitch things together with a common piece of metadata that allowed each service or each application to understand the particular ASOS service that we were, I guess, interested in. So from the beginning, we really wanted API and the prospect, or the concept, or the ability to integrate embedded, and Spotify has that, you know, as an API out the box. So that ticked that box. So on that score, you know, and I'll take you through all this in a demo in a minute, but from that perspective, that's really enabled us to start gathering that really rich data from the teams around the services they own, around, you know, the data classifications of it, where its criticality, which team owns it, which environments it's deployed in. Oh, we're kind of getting to that one, but you know, those kind of questions that typically take a long time to stitch that data together, we're now able to use the API and integrate that with our various other platforms, like ServiceNow for incident management, like XMatters for incident response. So we're getting that kind of single source of truth for information around our services and components, which is actually managed by the teams, which is exactly what we wanted. Because, you know, if you try and maintain this stuff centrally, it's at any organization of size, but an organization like ASOS, it changes so quickly. You know, that's a full-time job for multiple people. So we wanted to veer away from any kind of spreadsheet-based or heavy-handed approach that was centrally managed, put the power in the hands of the teams, and we'll ingest that data and we'll enrich it. And then off the back of that, this was something that's particularly exciting, is using some of the Backstage templating mechanisms. We're starting to, as the next phase of our, I guess, our engineering journey, is really look into fleet management. As I say, we have a large number of services out there, and having been on the journey of allowing teams full autonomy to pick the kind of technologies they use, pick how they deploy their software, how they, I guess, you know, manage it, we're slowly kind of, I guess, narrowing the path a little bit to veer back towards kind of establishing common standards and practices and actually doubling down on certain technologies like AKS, like SDO, like other kind of core infrastructure services that we didn't want teams kind of veering away from. So the Backstage templating mechanism has provided us kind of a gateway into those provisioning pipelines and other scaffolding tools that we've got to actually allow an engineer to come in and say, okay, I want to build an API on an AKS cluster and I want it deployed to these regions. Can you generate the pipeline, the repo, and some of our scaffolding, some of our other kind of coding practices that we want to disseminate across the organization. And then off the back of that, the latest kind of iteration is around actually making it a fully blown engineering portal. So somewhere that kind of engineers feel like they have to go to every day. You know, we want it to be the first place they go to when they get in the morning, and something that they really rely on. And that's kind of the ultimate aspiration, I guess. And I think for me, having joined the operations team from the engineering area, so the software catalog for me was a little bit of a Trojan horse. Let's get that in and let's get that established, and then we can start to build an engineering portal around it, and then we can start to really enrich this stuff and enrich the engineer's experience. So as I say, 2 years in roughly 5 minutes. It's been a very long journey. It's been a short journey. It's been a challenging journey. It's been an enjoyable journey. But we've really got Backstage now to a place where it is a crucial and critical part of our estate. It threads together so many crucial systems, our incident response, like I say, our fundamentals application, which is our version of the Spotify soundcheck scorecarding mechanism, our team designer, which is essentially Backstage for our people and our organization. It stitches all of this together so we have a common, I guess, interface and experience for people to interrogate this data. And even more than that is we're currently exploring AI chatbots and generative AI, and we're using the data that's held in Backstage, the service data, the data in TechDocs, some of the other material in there to feed that chatbot, so people can actually ask questions that are being powered by the data in Backstage. So it's becoming really, really front and center in the developer experience, and that's great. So I'll take you into the actual application now. Share a different screen. I apologize. I have one of those very wide monitors, so hopefully you can see it and it looks reasonably sensible. But I'll start from the top, basically. So I'll go a little bit in reverse. So when I mentioned we wanted to make this a engineering portal, so here what you'll see, first things first, is we've styled the application using the ASOS design system. Right? So historically, in the early part of the journey, we had the Spotify Backstage default interface, but we've styled that in the ASOS theme to really kind of bring it to life and give it that ASOS feel. So essentially what you have here is the homepage that anyone would come into if they were opting to come into the homepage. And to demonstrate some of those integrations with some of our other systems, what we've built is a newsfeed mechanism that allows us to publish useful information to engineers. So when the core releases of certain packages get released, it publishes that. When articles to our tech blog get published, it publishes that. When we have new training courses being run internally, it publishes that. So engineers kind of get a constant feed of information that's going on across the estate, because we have over 1,000 people in technology, many teams. We operate in at a very fast pace. So having that central place where we could pull in this data was really useful for engineers. You can see there we've also got our internal version of Stack Overflow. So this is pulling in recently asked questions. And I think if anyone else has tried to establish those kind of knowledge bases, they're only as good as the data you put in there. And we have found that when it was a disparate system on its own, we weren't able to get the traction in there to get questions asked frequently. But now it's on the Backstage homepage, people are seeing it and being like, oh, actually, okay, I can ask questions, and it's going to be surfaced to other engineers. So that's really helped us kind of tie up some of the, I guess, internal problem resolution situations that we sometimes have. Going back to the service templates, you can see here now on the left-hand side, these are the templates we've already put together. There are kind of major templates anyway, but we've actually got much more. So we're now creating templates for some of our data science and machine learning models. We've got templates for some of our other build automation tooling. So someone can come in and say, I want a couple of build build agents, please can you provision them for me and add them to my environment with the appropriate amount of permissions. And we do that because we have a lot of, you know, we operate in quite a very highly secure environment. So our build runners tend to need a lot of configuration and isolation and that sort of thing. So that's all able to be requested at the click of a button now in Backstage. So that's great. So yeah, you can see like any of you others that have used the templating mechanism, you can actually, we've really extended this so that you can essentially scaffold a complete API, and that will have embedded in it, and I'll take you into this in a minute, that will have embedded in it our fundamental practices. So engineers can essentially create a repo with an API skeleton in it that has all of our practices around logging, around security, around authentication, around I don't know, how to best structure request responses and APIs and that sort of thing. So it has it all there. They don't have to reinvent that. You know, configuration management, accessing Key Vault, accessing Cosmos DB. It gives you the patterns that you need, so engineers don't have to worry about that and just focus on building and solving business problems. So you have the I won't step you through the whole system there, but you can see here we've got the you know, the various names you want to call it, and this will then additionally will provision and set up the catalog info file. So we get the catalog info and the modeling out of the box. And I think if anyone's been on the Backstage journey, getting existing systems modeled can be very, very challenging. You know, we had to work really hard to sell the benefit as to what you were going to get out of this. We had to get senior leadership buy-in. We had to really kind of convince people that it's worth you spending a bit of time to create these YAML files for us. May not seem like it now, but it will be in the future. This does all that for us, right? It's out of the box. We can just start to standardize and start to manage our fleet and our applications in a more consistent manner, which helps engineers and it helps us. And I think on that point, one of the things we've invested really heavily in is the templates that we build and engineers, I guess, essentially customize. It's not a one-hit thing. It's not a one-way thing. If we have updates to that template, we push them out as well. So we kind of, you know, we make sure that we keep teams up to date and we'll raise a PR in their repos to allow them to, you know, apply those changes. And again, Backstage has been the front door for all of those out of process mechanics that do that, and it's really taken off. I think we've got around 60 components that are currently service template integrated, and that's quite significant because these components are our major components. You know, components that underpin search API and bag API and our you know, many of our payment systems. It's a significant achievement, and it, you know, Backstage being the front door for that has helped adoption a little bit on that. But finally, taking you into the catalog, so you're aware of the catalog. It's pretty you know, ubiquitous. But what we've done is we've added a load of our own custom tags, and we've also started to enrich the base metadata with our own data. And that's become really helpful for us. So if I take you into, say, take you into card API, the example. You can see here we've got a custom ASOS tag there of golden thread. Golden thread means it's on the set of services that are essential for a customer to complete a purchase. So we can very easily now derive and pull out data that says, give us all of our services that are currently on the golden thread. And that's really useful because we can then start building dashboards around that. We can start to understand, you know, okay, long term, if we can understand what technologies the golden thread services are using, if we have, say, an outage of Cosmos DB in Western Europe, we can then derive which components or which APIs are using Cosmos DB in Western Europe and enact an incident involving only those teams. You know, these are the kind of things we're striving towards. You can also see here custom ASOS fields and data that we're gradually adding to. So we've got a business criticality there. So we have various criticalities like many companies, mission critical, core, business supporting, business essential, and those kind of things. This helps us categorize those our components in a way that allows us again to drive intelligence and to drive decisions from that data. And finally, you have, you know, things like sensitivity, data classification. No, not finally. There is one more thing. I realise I'm running fast because there's just so much to talk about. And essentially, we have the data classification as well. So we're able to kind of really bring rich metadata into the customers, into the users, the developers' experience. But the last piece of the puzzle is around how we do kind of measuring the maturity of our software and how we build software. And that's been well established through our ASOS fundamentals platform, or kind of framework, which is essentially looks at how do you build software well in the cloud native world. So monitoring and observability, how do you deploy it? How do you performance test it? How secure is it? We have a load of patterns and practices and approaches we try to drive teams towards, and we're now integrating the surfacing of that into Backstage. And I'll show you it now, but I will preempt it by the fact that this next page was designed by a back-end engineer. So it's very, very basic. And I can say that because I am a back-end engineer, but it's not the most glamorous page you can see. But you can start to see here, like, you know, these are our various fundamentals and the things that we care about as an engineering organization. And you can see, you know, card API, they're pretty green on most areas. But if you wanted to kind of interrogate, okay, which teams are, you know, currently red on soak testing or SLOs, right? We could get that data on one place, and other teams can see it. Or if conversely, which teams are green on X? If they want to find out what other teams are doing well in a certain area, they can find it. And that's largely, I mean, as I say, I've gone through it in record pace. That's largely where we are. And next steps ultimately are continuing to build on it. Our principle from the very beginning was progress over perfection. Just keep iterating, keep building. We have a few big plans in the future, but like I say, at the moment, it's just get the services modeled. We're still modeling services. We're still finding quirks. We're still finding, you know, things that are mismodeled, and that's a big challenge. But we're getting there. And on that, I think I'll end. And I haven't seen any of the chat, by the way.
Wow, this is great. Your Backstage reminds us Spotify Backstage is so similar. So good job.
Yeah.
We have some questions in the chat. The first from Alex. What are you using or considering for the Gen AI implementation?
So we use essentially Azure across the estate, and MS Teams or Microsoft have recently developed a chatbot which is integrated in Teams. And one of our chief engineers recently done a POC to try and look at that and see how easy it would be to integrate that with Teams. And we've got a POC running now, and it's looking quite promising. So fairly simple, I believe, under the service that uses cognitive services on Azure, but I've not been too close to it. But we're trying to keep it really simple. We've got a pipeline in place that will ingest data from various sources, so Confluence, Backstage, our fundamental system, some of our key data, our key informational pieces of data, and give engineers that, not just engineers, I say engineers because I'm an engineer and I'm a little bit biased, but, you know, give everyone the opportunity to have conversations around this data. So you could say, you know, which team owns a bag API? You know, how do I define an SLO? And we'll give you ASOS curated, ASOS specific information around that. And we think that that's going to be the next, I guess, the next evolution of, you know, enabling engineers to get the answers they need quickly and to drive that kind of common mindset.
Nice. And how many engineers are using Backstage at ASOS?
We have across the estate around 800 engineers. I could be wrong on that. I didn't look at the figures before I joined, but roughly around 50 or 60 log in a day. And, you know, some will have it open all the time. Some will just go in when they want to check for a service or the owner of a service. But yeah, around 50, not the same 50 or 60, different 50 or 60, which may not sound a lot, but when you think about, you know, that's 50 questions that are potentially answered that wouldn't have been answered, that would have involved, you know, a conversation perhaps with a principal engineer or someone else. If you start to think about it in those terms, if you're slowing down, speeding up that time to resolution, whether it be answer, technical problem, you're getting that back. And like everything, you know, adoption is a hard thing. And it's easier to have people adopt something when you really invest in it and you've got the rich material there. I should point out that Backstage is self-hosted, as I said, and it's largely been maintained by 3 SRE engineers for that time, with myself and a few others kind of supporting it around the edges. So, you know, it's if we had Spotify's, firepower dedicated to Backstage, the things we do would be incredible. But yeah.
Nice. I see. And is the RAG status of fundamentals automatically populated or manually set by the engineering teams?
Yes, it's manually. So essentially what we do is we have another application called fundamentals application, very inventively named, which essentially allows teams to go through and score their services. And there's, I think, 28 categories at the moment. They go through, they score their services. They're typically red, amber, green. And they're not necessarily my old phrase is they're not GPS, they're a compass. They're not like very, very prescriptive. They're more, are you going in the right direction? What's your level of maturity? Engineers will then score their services on those, and then we ingest those into Backstage through that plugin that we built. But that's a framework and a set of practices we've had in place now for around 5 years. And we did it because we realized that different teams had different versions of what they thought good looked like. So the fundamentals, I've actually written an article on both the fundamentals and Backstage, and I can share those afterwards if you want. 2 separate articles that explains the journey we went on to kind of try and establish, what does good look like at ASOS? And it's not just what good looks like for engineers. What does it look like for operations, for architecture, for security, for our performance and scalability teams? It tries to kind of consolidate all of those things into practices that engineers then self-score. And the engineers can feed back into it, say, you know what, that's unachievable, or that's great. And engineers have actually, for a period of time, we only had the fundamentals and the golden thread services, and engineers were seeing that the teams that operated golden thread services were able to use the fundamentals to negotiate, to do work. We're red in these areas, and we've just seen that we've had an incident that we would have maybe not had if we had invested in our pipelines and invested in our, any other related practice. And so that convinced us and showed us that this needed to be ubiquitous, needed to be across the whole estate. So we spent a lot of work rewriting the fundamentals so they were applicable to not just our front-end APIs and our web stack, but all of our systems, data science, some of our retail systems. That was a long piece of work, but they're getting very, very well adopted now. There are internal scorecard, sound check.
Nice, thank you. Next question from Patrick. Was the software catalog your starting point when rolling out Backstage? And are you using any particular strategies for adoption?
Yeah, so it was essentially because the Backstage project initially was sponsored and driven and is actually still owned by operations, tech operations and ASOS. The software catalog was what they were most interested in. They wanted to make sure that we had a really clear handle on which services we had out in the wild. So the software catalog was, they wanted to know what was out in the wild, but in engineering, what we wanted to make sure is that we weren't kind of having to update single systems or tell someone what our services were. So we had to strike this balance between operations needing to know what was out in the wild and engineers being able to maintain that data easily in the IDE or the tools of their choice, right? So it was initially the software catalog that was the kind of forerunning feature that got Backstage into the door and got us invested in Backstage. And how we drove adoption was essentially make sure you get senior leadership buy-in. That was like number one. Like get them on board and get them understanding exactly what you're trying to do, and that this isn't a overnight thing. This is something that's going to take a while to build up. Second is really sell the benefits of the platform and what it's going to bring to engineers over time as well, because that gets them bought into it and that gets them, willing to help you out and help you test certain things. The other important facet was what do you say, the benefits of it? So I've got a little bit of a mind block. To encourage, I guess, adoption and innovation. And because we are a small team as SRE at the time, we developed a badging system for engineers so they could earn a Backstage Certified Developer badge or a Certified Architecture badge if they got a commit in domain, right? So that then led to engineers out in the world, building plugins and really like looking at the code base and helping us out. So that again drove a bit more adoption. But underneath all of that was the principle of, progress over perfection. It would have been very easy to say, okay, we're not launching this until we have everything modeled. We're not launching this until we have, modules for this, and that. And if we'd done that, I would be showing you a blank screen today, because, you have to get this stuff out in the world. You have to make sure, people see it, they can see it evolving, and, they feel bought into it, and it brings them value. And the last thing I'd say is repetition. You have to repeat the message over and over and over again. We have a regular monthly engineering update. We have, many channels, and for a period of time, I don't think I went to any meeting about mentioning Backstage. So it's just a repetitive message over and over again. And you get that.
Amazing. I think this is like a good content for people who want to learn more stories about adoption. This is really, really great. Thank you. I don't see any other question, but feel free to drop it in the chat. But thank you so much, Scott. This was great. And yeah, hope to see you around in Discord or GitHub or like in another community session.
Yeah, we're always about, and we're also very interested in hearing other people's stories as well. So because we want to learn from others as well, and we do. Some of my the SRE engineers keep an eye on the Discord and jump in there. So yeah, we're invested.
Nice, amazing. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
All right. Next on the agenda, if I can find the screen, Q&A. So feel free to drop any question about like, today's topic, or like any topic you want to discuss about Backstage, things that you don't understand or things like you want to go into the details. There is no dummy question. So we're here. So I just pause for a minute. And yeah, Scott, Heikki is asking what's the best way to reach out to you.
Oh no, cool. I'll drop my email address in the channel.
Amazing. Cool. I pause for a second, and yeah, feel free to drop any message.
You'll forgive me. I'm also going to put the articles I wrote for Backstage and Fundamentals in the channel as well. I'm not self-promoting, but I think it might be.
That's great. That's great. Do that. We also, on the Backstage Community repository, we have a section for blog posts, so you can also make a contribution if you want to publish there. It's very welcome.
Cool. Yeah, I think we had some conversations in the early days with people, but yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
All right. I don't see any other question, so I think we can wrap it up now. Thank you so much for joining. And as I said before, there will be a next community session next month. The issues will be open soon in Backstage Community Repository. Feel free to drop a message if you want to share anything about your Backstage journey. And yeah, see you around on Discord, GitHub, or yeah, on an other community session. Thank you so much.